She had no shoes, no name anyone remembered, and a bucket that clanged with every step. He had everything a man could want, except the truth. When she spoke, he almost didn't hear her. But the words stayed, and by morning, the ground beneath his world had shifted. The sound of heels on marble echoed like a metronome in the grand hallway. Kate swept past her husband with practiced elegance, her dress whispering silk against the walls. She didn't look at him as she answered the buzzing phone. "Don't be late for the board meeting," she said, her voice breezy, lips painted into a perfect smile. It lingered a second too long, and never quite reached her eyes. David Huntington stood still, straightening the cuffs of his navy suit as the front door opened. His chauffeur was already waiting beside the car, hands clasped, gaze respectfully lowered. No one spoke. The house around him gleamed like a museum. White, polished, silent. As the car rolled past the hedges, David glanced at the gardener trimming boxwoods with deliberate care. Two maids crossed the driveway, arms full of linen. No one greeted him. No eye contact. He might as well have been another column, another part of the estate. Impressive, functional, unseen. The car slowed near the back gate. There, crouched by the stone wall, was a small girl with skin the color of warm earth and wild curls sticking to her cheeks. Barefoot, a rusty bucket beside her. Her dress was torn at the hem, knees dusty. She didn't move when the car passed, just sat, watching. Inside the house, one of the housekeepers muttered as she cleared breakfast dishes. "She shows up sometimes. Quiet kid. Don't bother her." But David had noticed her eyes. That afternoon, the sun dipped low enough to catch on the brass door handles. David returned home early, an itch at the back of his neck he couldn't shake. He walked the stone path toward the back gate. The girl was still there, still barefoot, still watching. "You hungry?" he asked. She didn't blink, just shook her head. Then, without hesitation, "I came to tell you something." David's breath caught, just for a moment. "What's that?" She looked at him, calm. "Your wife is lying to you. I saw her last night. She said she was almost free." The words felt misplaced, strange, like someone whispering a riddle inside a church. David stared at her. "What did you say?" The girl repeated it, slow and clear. "Your wife said she was almost free." The phrase hit somewhere behind his ribs, not loud, just a weight, sudden and cold. He didn't ask her anything else. Not who she was, not where she came from. She didn't offer, just picked up her bucket and walked down the alley without looking back. That night, Kate stood in front of her vanity, gold earrings catching the lamplight. She scrolled through her phone, laughing once, light and sharp. David sat on the edge of the bed, motionless, his tie still on. "Edward Brooks?" he asked quietly. Kate's head tilted, her mouth half curved. "What about him?" "You mentioned him." "Did I?" She smiled again. "He's heading the Zurich acquisition. Should be good for us." Us. Later, when the house had folded into shadows, David sat alone in the study. The leather chair creaked under him. The ice in his whiskey had melted. He stared at the dark screen of an old laptop, then reached behind the bookshelf and pressed a switch. A small drawer clicked open. Inside was a secure drive. He hadn't used it in years. Old habits from a life before marble. His fingers hesitated on the keyboard, then typed. It took less than 5 minutes to access the internal surveillance system, something Kate insisted they didn't need anymore. But David had kept a few feeds active. Silent ones. Private. He watched footage from the garden wing. 1:47 a.m. Kate, barefoot, wrapped in a silk robe, moving like she knew no one was watching. Then Edward appeared. No greeting, just a touch, a whisper. The mic barely picked it up. He's almost done. David's jaw tightened. His hand twitched, knocking over the glass. The sound didn't startle him. Not just infidelity. Something colder, sharper. He didn't sleep. By dawn, the mansion felt unfamiliar. He moved through it, as if it no longer belonged to him. The morning staff avoided his gaze. The coffee in his hand tasted metallic. He opened the curtain in his office and looked toward the gate. The girl was gone. No rusted bucket. No bare feet. But the phrase stayed. Almost free. He stood there for a long time. The birds outside chirped as if nothing had shifted, as if everything inside him hadn't cracked open. That was the moment. Not when he heard the words, not when he saw the footage, but there, in the silence of a perfect room, when the girl was no longer there to say it again. It began then. The banker at Huntington and Wills didn't ask questions when David requested full control over all joint accounts. He simply nodded, typed, and handed David a confirmation form. Paper rustled softly under his fingers as he signed it. No tremor in his hand, no visible hesitation. But a muscle at his jaw ticked once, just once, and the banker looked away. Back in his car, David sat motionless while the city moved beyond the window. Charleston breathed with slow, sticky rhythm, heat pressing through glass, horns muffled, streets shining with early sun. The chauffeur waited for instructions, but David didn't speak. He just watched a woman pull her child across a crosswalk. A flash of small shoes, a pink backpack. His hand twitched. At home, Kate was in the lounge, tossing ice cubes into a glass of white wine. A travel magazine lay open on her lap, pages splayed wide like wings. She didn't look up when he entered. "How's Zurich this time of year?" he asked. Her head lifted slowly. She blinked once. "Zurich?" His voice was mild. "I hear Edward's been busy." A beat, then a practiced laugh, light and easy. "Oh, that," she sipped her wine. "Don't be dramatic. Zurich's for the board. Edward just facilitates things." She tilted her glass toward him, eyes unreadable. "You're overthinking again." David nodded slowly, his gaze on her face. Then he turned and walked out without another word. The ice in her glass clinked like teeth. That night, sleep didn't come. He sat by the fireplace, hands loose in his lap. The flames danced across the floorboards. The room smelled of sandalwood and ash. Somewhere, a clock ticked. A memory slipped in. 14 years old, hiding under the rusted awning of a train station, rain pouring like punishment. He remembered the cold ache in his legs, the way hunger made you feel like you were disappearing from the inside out. A woman had passed by, paused, then returned with a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. "You don't talk much," she'd said. "That's all right. People see what they want to see." He'd never asked her name. The next morning, David left the house early. No suit, just jeans and an old coat he hadn't worn in years. His driver blinked when he opened the garage himself and drove the second car, a dusty Range Rover Kate hated. He parked a few blocks from the old bakery. It was boarded up now, windows taped with cardboard, graffiti curling around the brick. But the alley beside it was clean. No bottles, just footprints in the dust. Inside the shelter down the street, the air was thick with the smell of bleach and instant coffee. A woman behind the desk recognized him, tried to smooth her hair. He only asked one question. "Do you know a little girl? Maybe 6. Curly hair, carries a bucket." The woman's face changed. "Lily," she said quietly. "She's not here. Sleeps near the old bakery sometimes. Doesn't say much. Just watches." David nodded. "Thank you." "Sir," she added after a pause. "She's careful, doesn't trust easy." "I understand." That afternoon, David stood in the elevator of an office tower that smelled like new carpet and printer ink. The glass walls showed the city like a painting. Edward Brooks's office was on the top floor. "David!" Edward stood, beaming, tie knotted perfectly. "Didn't know you were in today." David closed the door behind him. "I just had a question," he said calmly. "Shouldn't take long." Edward gestured to the leather chairs. "Of course. Shoot." David didn't sit. He pulled out his phone and tapped a button. A whisper played, thin and quiet. "He's almost done." Edward didn't move at first, then blinked, swallowed. "That's..." David raised a hand. "I don't need a story." "David, listen. There's no proof of anything. You have a recording, sure, but no context, no legal angle." David's voice was low. "I have silence. Yours." Edward's expression faltered. Then he laughed, short and forced. "I didn't mean anything by it." David turned to leave. As he opened the door, he said, "You did, and so did she." That night, Kate stormed into the study. Her voice cracked like a whip. "You set me up!" David didn't look up from the papers he was signing. "You lied!" Her heels clicked across the floor, sharp and angry. "You're humiliating me. Do you understand that? People notice when you freeze accounts, when you cancel trips. You underestimated the only person who didn't ask me for anything." Kate paused. "Who?" He looked up. "The girl." Her face changed, something flinching beneath her cheekbones. "You're being absurd," she said. "A stray kid?" He said nothing more. She left without slamming the door. The next day, it rained. David parked near the bakery and waited. The windshield fogged with his breath. The wipers squeaked across the glass. 2 hours passed. Then, through the mist, he saw her. Lily. Her bucket scraped the wet pavement. She didn't hurry, just walked as if the rain didn't touch her. David stepped out. His shoes splashed into a shallow puddle. Rain slid into his collar. He walked toward her slowly, hands empty. "You were right," he said quietly. She looked up. "You saw it first." She didn't reply. He knelt slowly, knees soaking through. From his pocket, he pulled a gold necklace. The chain was thin, delicate. The charm was a small disc, one word engraved. Seen. She didn't reach for it, just stared. He held it out. His hand didn't shake. For a long moment, the rain filled the space between them. Then she said, barely above the rain, "Okay." She took his hand. Not the necklace. Not yet. They stood there in the silence. A man and a girl, both soaked, both quiet, and something in the air shifted. Not loud, just real. At the mansion, no one said anything when Lily walked in. The staff watched from the corners. A maid paused with a tray. The butler blinked. David walked ahead, not announcing, not explaining. The bucket left little drops across the marble floor. No one told her to stop. By the end of the week, her name was added to the guest house registry. She didn't speak much, ate quietly, wrote letters on napkins with crayons, kept the bucket by her bed. And still, she watched. In the halls, people began to lower their voices when she passed. The mansion had not changed, but something had. And far beneath the chandelier light, beneath the polished silver and velvet chairs, a kind of silence settled. Not heavy, but waiting. The house was quieter now, but not with the old, heavy kind of quiet. Not the kind made of locked doors and unsaid things. This quiet felt different, like the space between breaths, like something beginning. Lily's shoes made soft tapping sounds across the tile as she crossed the hall. She wore a cotton dress with little stitched moons across the hem, and her curls were pinned back with a silver clip. The bucket still came with her. Less rust now, someone must have cleaned it. But it still creaked faintly when she walked. The staff didn't flinch anymore when they saw it. She had her own room in the guest house now. Her own books. The light in there came through gauzy curtains in the morning, and the walls had chalkboard paint in wide squares so she could draw whenever she wanted. She didn't draw people. She drew planets. Whole systems with names only she seemed to understand. In the main house, the staff had started talking again. Not just to each other. To David. One morning, the gardener, gruff, silent, paused while trimming back the camellias. He looked up, then said, "She helped the cat last night. The gray one with the limp." Didn't say much. Just sat with it till it stopped shaking. David only nodded. But later that evening, he brought the old cat a blanket. In the kitchen, the chef gave Lily a wooden spoon too big for her hand and let her stir batter while he sang along to the radio. "No eggshells," he told her once, surprised. "You got good hands." The butler, the one who used to move like a shadow, began keeping small shoes polished at the back door. One night, at a charity gala, David stood among polished shoes and champagne laughter. His suit hung easier on his frame now. He didn't wear the navy anymore. Something softer, gray with open cuffs. Across the room, a board member chuckled with his drink raised. "I see David brought the stray," he said, nodding toward Lily, who was spinning slowly near the corner in a dress she'd chosen herself. Too bright, but she liked it. David didn't blink. "That stray saved your portfolio," he said quietly. The board member's grin faltered. Around them, the room shifted. No one spoke for a full 10 seconds, long enough to change something. Later, as the city glowed outside the ballroom windows, David stood on the terrace. He was alone, his hand wrapped around a glass he hadn't touched. Behind him, laughter swirled. Ahead of him, stars. He thought of what Lily had said, that first day. She said she was almost free. He couldn't forget it. 2 weeks later, the board met again. They were offering him a full expansion package, coastal properties, international seats, a legacy fund. His name would outlive him. David accepted, but halfway through the meeting, he adjusted his chair, cleared his throat, and said, "Half of the expansion fund. I want it redirected." There was a pause. Paper rustled. Someone coughed. "Redirected where?" a woman asked. "To children," he said. "To the ones no one sees. The ones who don't ask. The ones who watch." More silence. He slid a folder across the table. The name was already printed on the first page. The Scene Project. Outside the windows, Charleston glimmered like a slow-burning candle. Back at the estate, Lily was kneeling on the driveway with chalk in her hands, her dress stained with color. She was drawing planets again. Big ones, spinning ones, ones with too many rings. David sat on the steps behind her, holding a coffee cup gone cold. He watched her for a while. "What's that one?" he asked. She didn't look up. "The blue one's mine." He nodded. "Good orbit," he said. She paused, then looked over her shoulder. "You think people ever get free?" David thought for a moment. Then he said, "Some don't even know they're locked." She went back to drawing. She did. David didn't ask who she meant. He already knew. In the months that followed, the mansion changed in quiet ways. The housekeeper began leaving out extra towels just in case. The back gate was unlocked a little more often. Volunteers came and went from the guest house like a rhythm. Some taught music, some just listened. One afternoon, Lily stood beside the chef, showing a new boy how to slice apples without cutting too deep. The boy didn't talk much, but he watched her hands, and when she handed him a slice, he nodded. He carried a bucket, too. Later, she sat beside him on the back steps, both of them holding their buckets between their knees. "I know," she said softly. He didn't answer, but he leaned against her shoulder, just a little. 1 year later, the house smelled like cinnamon and paint. The walls had new frames, photos of children, staff, even David in a wrinkled polo shirt, grinning crookedly with flour on his chin. There was a celebration that night. Streamers and white lights strung across the courtyard. People came, board members, neighbors, staff in pressed shirts. The chef made too many cakes. The butler played the piano. The gardener wore a tie. Lily stood beside David under the arch of lights. She held his hand, but her grip wasn't small anymore. She had grown, not taller exactly, but steadier. The kind of steady that came from being seen. David raised his glass. His voice was quiet, but the crowd hushed. "The world saw her as small," he said, "but she saw what none of us could. Now I see, too." He looked down at her, not with pride, but with something closer to reverence. Lily smiled. Then she leaned in and whispered, "Maybe you were never blind, just scared to look." The night held its breath around them. Then, slowly, applause rose. Not loud, not showy, just warm, real. Later, after the guests had gone, David walked through the hallway alone. No suit, just slippers and a cotton sweater. He passed the mirror in the foyer, the one where he used to fix his tie, check his hair, make sure the world saw a man who had it all. He didn't look this time. From the courtyard, a laugh rang out. High, clear, unmistakably Lily's. He followed the sound, and behind him, the house stayed lit. Not bright, but alive.